Hello, everybody. This is the Stag, and we're sitting with local entrepreneur and how would you class yourself? I'll let you introduce yourself there, Nabbs. Who's Thomas Nabbs right now?
Who is Thomas Nabbs right now? Well, I am the founder of an organisation called The Water Boy, and it started out as a for-profit business, as a social enterprise, and we've just gone into the not-for-profit space. So if you had to classify me, I'm definitely a founder. Would you call me an entrepreneur? Many would say yes, and some would say no. But the fact that we are generating an income in terms of social enterprise, then yeah, I'd probably still classify myself as an entrepreneur, even though it is at the head of a not-for-profit organisation. Yeah.
Massive. So, Thomas, what would be your defining characteristic when you were a child, when you were a wee Thomas Nabbs?
Oh man, probably rebellious, I'd say. I loved my sport first and foremost. I came out of a sporting family, and I was very confident in my sporting ability. Probably drilled into me from the fact that everyone used to tell me that I had a mother who represented New Zealand at netball, and that gives you confidence. And not only was it my parents and my grandparents that used to tell me that, sort of everyone used to say, "Oh, your mum was a really good netball player," and you used to, I don't know, rightly or wrongly by association, as a kid, you used to think that would wear off onto you. And so I'd always attack any sporting situation with confidence. And so in terms of defining characteristics as a child, though, I was actually lucky enough to be, I used to pick things up quite quickly, which was a good thing and a bad thing. It was a good thing because I was obviously very, very blessed at being able to do things, but bad thing because it didn't teach me how to work hard. And whilst I got to the top of the class in primary school, by the time it came to years, about 10 and 11, you had to start working hard to pick things up. And it wasn't necessarily just about those who were the most talented. And by the time it came to third form, fourth form, fifth form, or years 9, 10, 11, I think it is these days, that I was used to cruising, and I was used to being able to just pick things up really quickly. So those were my, I suppose, rebellion years, where I was always wanting to grow up really fast as a kid. And in my younger years, I was able to grow up really fast. I was able to move on and do all the things that the older kids were doing, and come sort of 14, 15, I was still wanting to do what all the older kids were doing, which I suppose was going out and all of that sort of stuff. And it clashed with a time that that you had to start working hard, in which I've since realised you only get places if you're going to work hard. But yeah, it took a little bit of time to come to that realisation.
Awesome, man. And so it's I know you quite well, and you've been on a bit of a journey been through high school. You did the uni thing and then set off around the world. What was sort of your journey following the university thing, mate?
I did, I suppose, what a lot of Premier Club rugby players in New Zealand do, and head off, or a lot of New Zealanders do. I did the OE and managed to get myself a nice little cushy number in Tunbridge Juddion's rugby club down in Kent, playing, I think it was National 3, and that was a semi-professional gig, which was quite nice. Did a little bit of work with Barclaycard there, and then also started a wedding and event hire business for a guy who had the idea and the funding, just not the time. And I suppose he saw something in me that he quite liked, and trusted me with his money to go and execute his idea for him. So I came up with a brand and a name and all of that sort of thing, and turned it from idea into first sale. And then handed it off. Then went to San Francisco, played a bit of rugby, worked for a Kiwi-based company there that was starting operations in America, and worked around the States there.
Nice. And so, how do you think this travel has shaped you as a person, mate?
It's given me perspective. It's shown me what New Zealand has and doesn't have. Excuse me. Excuse me. That's the biggest thing. It's given me perspective as to what New Zealand, yes, has and doesn't have, but also does well. And I think we do sport really well. It's a really integral part of our culture. You'll hear me say a number of times, if you listen to me enough, that I think sport's a large part of what makes up the fabric of our society. And I've known a world growing up, a New Zealand growing up, where if you wanted to have the opportunity to play sport, you could. Now, that's just the world that I've known. I think, well, poverty now, 24% of New Zealand children live below the poverty line, meaning that their parents can't afford sufficient food, shelter, and heating for them, let alone, and then if that's the case, how can we expect them to pay for sports expenses? And the simple answer to that is we can't. But back in the 80s, that number was only 12%, and that's the world that I've known. And having that opportunity to be able to do sport if you wanted. And I suppose it was an eye-opener being overseas, realising, now I was based in San Francisco when I was in the USA, and even within one of the most wealthiest cities in the USA, such as San Francisco, it doesn't take long to be able to walk down the street and realise that a lot of people don't have the opportunity to play sport, even if they so wish. And then so that was a real eye-opener for me, and it made me realise how lucky New Zealand is. But I was also able to take what San Francisco does really well, some of the business concepts that are applied over there, some of the forward thinking. They have got a very good work ethic in the United States and San Francisco, and especially the higher professional quarters over there, the ones in the startup space in San Francisco, very much epitomises that. Learnt work ethic there and realised how much New Zealand is. I know I'm generalising, New Zealand probably don't work as hard as the US, but I also think it's a good thing. I think the US work too hard.
Nice, mate. So why do you believe the charity or non-profit sector in New Zealand needs your skills? What are you going to bring to us, mate?
Oh, look. Firstly, the concept, the organisation of the Waterboy is needed. It's needed, but I've already iterated that 24% of New Zealand children now live in poverty, and that, by the way, that number is set to increase. As I said, it's more than doubled since I was a boy, and I mean, that was a 2015 figure. I wouldn't even be surprised if it is 25, 26% now. And so these people don't have the opportunity to do sport. It's not just financial and poverty. There's people with disabilities and people with transport, homophobia is a big issue, race, religion, age, gender, time. There are so many things that stop people doing sport. And I think that's reflected in the decreasing numbers of people that do sport. Even lifestyle is a barrier these days. And I think that also a lot of that can be attributed to the increasing mental and physical health problems we're experiencing as a society. More and more today you hear of people with depression. Obesity is becoming a massive thing, and that is no coincidence that we're becoming less active as a population as well, and the human body isn't designed to be active. So in terms of that's why I think the water boy is needed in society, just to, and in New Zealand, is just to make New Zealand a better place. What am I as a person bringing to the not-for-profit culture, or sorry, the not-for-profit space? That is very much a attitude of hand up, not out. And what I mean by that is creating value to create funding and to make it financially sustainable. I've realised that within our model, by telling our story, we're creating value for businesses, something which I think New Zealanders as a whole and New Zealand businesses do very poorly, is tell their stories and show their work. I think that comes from a couple of things. I think it comes from our tall poppy culture. We are not very accustomed to putting our hand up and saying, I'm really good at doing this, or this is the awesome work that I'm doing. Would much rather just do it and not get any accolades for it. There are positives and negatives with that, and I'm sure that you're quite aware of the benefits of showing kindness, not only to the person giving the kindness, the person receiving the kindness, but those witnessing the kindness. And with social media now, we've all got the ability to witness kindness at a large scale, and bringing both physical and mental health benefits, but also that kindness is like a yawn. So it's what's the word I'm looking for here?
Contagious.
Contagious. Thank you. And I'm not producing this research. The scientists are producing this research. I'm literally just regurgitating what they're saying now. So I found value in showing the story, and so there's one element, bringing value to the not-for-profit space, hand up, not out, in saying, okay, businesses, we don't want you to give a handout and put your sponsorship money down a black hole. You're actually going to get this the power of story back in video form, and you're going to be able to show your work. Now, I know you're not comfortable with showing your work, so you know what, the water boy is going to show you cool work for you, and thus beat that tall poppy syndrome, and still gain those benefits of everyone seeing the kindness. So that's a little thing that we're bringing. And on top of that, I think it's a no. Yeah.
Okay, mate. Just before we move on, it's quite interesting you bring up the tall poppy syndrome in New Zealand. Our first podcast, Liam McAwee, also mentioned that was one of the things that he really disliked about when he was back here in New Zealand. He loves New Zealand. He loves many aspects of being a New Zealander, but the one thing that he has noticed, and especially moving to Canada, is this, like you say, ability for people to put their hand up and say, we're doing a good job here. How did you find that in probably a culture that reflects New Zealand quite a lot in the UK, and then going to the USA and seeing how they do things with success and with doing a good job?
I found the UK very much like New Zealand. And I think they've got a tall poppy culture over there as well. That was just my experience. That may not be the case, but I also spend a lot of time around New Zealanders and Australians over there. So, yeah, when it comes to America, they're probably the other end of the spectrum, in all honesty. They're probably a little bit too much. Yeah, look at me, I'm awesome. Yeah, and don't get me wrong, I suppose by nurture, I do have the humble side of me as well, and I'm sort of proud of that, because I'm proud of where I'm from, and no one likes someone who's going to stand up there and blow their own trumpet 24/7. But there's a fine balance. I think we do have to show our work. And if we're doing something cool, especially something that's going to benefit others, that's what I see as cool anyway. I don't want you to stand up there and say, yeah, I just made, I don't know, I made X amount of money and ripped all these people off, and now I'm going to go and buy this awesome car. I really don't give a toss about that. But if you're going to say, oh, look, I'm helping these people, I want to sit up and listen to you, because I don't know, there's something about that I care about, and I suppose it gives us a good serotonin release.
Nice, mate. So then what was the motivating factor for coming back to New Zealand? You know, a lot of people would argue you're in the, I don't know, the heyday place of the world, and you come back to out of this piece of land in the middle of the ocean.
Yeah. I'd love to say something inspirational. In all honesty, it was to do with the relationship that I was in at the time. I was working, as I say, in a startup over there, and the stars just aligned. So I wanted to, if we were going to get married, I wanted her to live in New Zealand at some stage. And things weren't going too flash with her job. I was spending a lot of time away from home in my job, and it was decided, initially mooted by her and then agreed with by me, that would come back to New Zealand for a phase before settling over in San Francisco again. But that relationship has since ended. And so I'm back here, and I'm really happy about it. Though I found my calling doing my work in the Waterboy, I'm all focused on my work with the Waterboy now, and all about just being as productive as I can in this space.
Fantastic. Just a little thought came to my mind. How have you found coming back to a community of New Zealand? Do you find we're doing that well, or is there areas where our community could do a better job in getting around each other? Like say, you've been head down into your work. Have you had a chance to connect with people again, or has it been very much professional connections?
That's a hard one, purely because I'm from around here. And I've been able to make really good connections, but a lot of the time I've had an introduction, or it hasn't just been, they've been quite natural connections. I know that people who go to live in a new part of New Zealand, or someone coming from overseas to come and live in New Zealand, trying to make those connections for the first time can be really tough. And I've sort of learned when a situation works well for me. Cold calling, it doesn't work full stop throughout the world. There's much better ways to go about cold calling these days. If you need to know those methods, if you're in sales, I used to be in sales in the UK. Give us a bell and I'll put you onto a couple of books to read. But it's the same with connections. I really don't think that going along and handing your business card out to some networking drinks works. It might work for some, but it's really not my cup of tea. If I am in that situation, I just try and have a conversation with one person, and a good conversation with that person, and take from that conversation, or more importantly, give to that conversation what I can, and give to that person what I can. I'm not interested in meeting someone and talking about how cold it's been, giving them my business card, and then moving on to do the same thing with the other person.
We love our weather, eh, mate?
Oh, don't we?
Yeah. It probably segues into slightly a new topic. The politics in New Zealand's heating up here at the moment with
Isn't it?
Change of Labour leader today.
Yeah.
What would you like to see from political leaders in New Zealand? So not quite on the topic, but as a wee segue in.
Yeah, I'd like to see the. Do you mean in terms of policy, Or do you mean in terms of characteristics?
Break it down both those aspects. Yeah, start off with a policy from your perspective.
So I'm from the new school, right? I suppose it's new school, but I'll tell you where I get it from, and it is the information sharing we've got these days is like we've never had before. One of the founders of Google thinks that, or estimates that, the amount of information produced from the beginning of time through to 2003, that same quantity is emulated every 48 hours now, which is just crazy if you try and wrap your head around that, right? So we've got all this information available to us and at our disposal, yet we still have the same political agendas and political systems as in the past. Now, we are in absolute crisis as a planet. We are going through a massive amount of climate change, and the scientists are all unanimous here. They're not saying, oh, it's maybe, and there used to be some saying yes and some saying no. And that's absolutely definitive. They're all unanimous, saying that we need to reduce our waste, we need to reduce our emissions, and our whole economy needs to change. There's a fight on our hands for the first time in history, and a fight that we are sticking our heads in the sand against at the moment. And that is one has to give, and it's either our economy or our planet. And neither can keep going in coexistence. And I tell you what, the economy doesn't work without the planet, so our economy has to give. But people don't realize that yet. People are still. I'm one of the most reluctant people to change my diet that you'll ever meet. I'm a Waikato boy through and through, and I, for years, realised that I should be stopping eating meat. I just couldn't bring myself to do it. I now only eat meat once a week, or I probably in reality eat it more than that, but very conscious of my need to help change the planet. We need to change our consumers' behaviour in terms of we buy clothes because they're cheap and then throw them out. We will, if something's, here's a good example, if the microwave's broken, it's cheaper to go and buy a new one than it is to fix it. We don't really give any due consideration as to the resources that we take from the planet for that microwave to get made. And that has got to change, because the planet is just screaming out at us. And such thing that, we've got to start purchasing and becoming owners and not consumers. And I'd really like to see the world and politics wake up and consume the information that the scientists are telling us and start incorporating that into their politics. In reality, that's not going to come until people start demanding that from their politicians, until the world realizes that our economy is in crisis, or more, our planet's in crisis, and that our economy is the reason. We're still far too concerned with this drug that we call money, and we are far too concerned with trying to make lots of it. And I think the answer to it is social enterprise. I think the answer to money, or to the economy's problems, is getting rid of capitalism. And the way that would work in my eyes would be Coca-Cola, for example, being owned by a charity. And you see examples of Thank You in Australia, founded by Daniel Flynn and his wife Justine and Justin. and they are starting to change the world with getting rid of capitalism, and they're taking on your Coca-Colas in the water sector. All profits of that go toward providing fresh water for others, but I think we've got to change it so that even real estate companies, they pay the people, they pay the CEOs appropriately for their salaries, but shareholders, there are no such thing. The shareholders is a charity, and then that charity can afford to fight against climate change and to fight against let's say our water quality. Water is going to become a massive issue, but yeah, I think that's the way that our economy's got to go. And in terms of policy, I wish that we would, our politicians, would start taking some of these things more seriously before it gets too late. Will that happen? I'm dreaming if I think that's going to happen. And I'm not going to beat myself up over it. Otherwise, my life would be pretty sour and pretty somber. The only thing I can do is do my part, and yeah, I'm also not one of these people who, believe it or not, although I've spoken about it on this podcast, if you hang out with me socially, I'm not going to be talking about all these things all the time. I'd rather speak through my actions than through being that guy who preaches all the time, and who tries to tell others to stop eating meat. If someone asks me why I'm not eating meat, I'll tell them, but I'm not going to sit there and despise others, because everyone's a product of their environment, and not everyone can see the impacts that they're having. And if people can't see the impacts that they're having, then they are not going to want to change. And if they're not going to want to change, then they're not going to change. Out of sight, out of mind, you could say.
And so from a leadership perspective, I'm sure you've come across plenty of leaders, obviously in sport and now to some extent across the business world. How do you think actual leadership qualities or personalities of these people, what would you like to see from the party leaders happening? You talk about honesty and open-mindedness.
Yeah, that's quite a simple answer for me. And in any leadership situation, I like to think that I wouldn't ask anyone to do anything I wouldn't do myself. And I'd love to see politicians actually walk their talk, because 100% of them don't. And again, I might be actually dreaming, but if they're wanting to set a minimum wage to please go and live on that minimum wage yourself. Or if they don't think that, for example, the mayor of Hamilton, Andrew King, just said that Hamilton doesn't need to bring in a no plastic bags policy. It's absolutely not an issue. I'd love him to go out on the boats out in Raglan that clear up the rubbish out of the sea every day, and then and walk his talk and come back and then tell us it's absolutely not an issue, because the amount of rubbish that ends up out in our sea is just disgusting. And yeah, I would love to see our business leaders and our politicians reduce the distance between their decision making and the impact. I'd love them to go and actually witness the impact firsthand. We have one of the smallest power distances in the world here in New Zealand, which I think is a fantastic thing. And for those who don't know what a power distance is, it's the difference between the bottom person in an organisation and the top person, and that bottom person will feel quite confident to tell that top person what to do. That comes from our size and from our culture, and so I think that's going to be an advantage in our politicians and our business leaders actually going close to the ground to see the impact that those decisions that they make are going to make. And a great example of that would be before someone decides to lay off 800 employees, I'd love that person to go and meet those employees first. I would love that person to go around to those families' houses and actually see how that is going to affect their lives. Now, if after that, if you know those people personally and you've seen their situation, you still need to lay them off. Okay, I get that. If it's because either 800 people lose their jobs for the sake of 10,000 people being able to keep their jobs, and otherwise 10,800 people all lose their jobs because we're going under, then I can kind of understand that. But to not see that impact firsthand, to not almost be crying over the decision to have to make, just as there will be a lot of tears shed from those 800 people, that to me it's not leadership at all, and it's rubbish. So yeah, that's what I'd like to see from our politicians and from our leaders.
Fantastic, mate. And you're a really smart guy, as we've just heard. You've been able to quote off the top of your head a number of facts and statistics that you've been looking into. As a university graduate, what do you believe most served you from your time as a university student?
Oh, my network.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Network. You make your best friends between the ages of 18 and 30. It might be 16 and 30 actually. And those are the friends that last an absolute lifetime. And some of the times that we've had will be the biggest thing to come out of my university education. Perhaps I underestimate the things that I learned in economics class and accounting class, but honestly, I probably don't remember any of those things. Continued work ethic, but you can get work ethic from anywhere. It's because I did a management degree as well. Like, a lot of the stuff is irrelevant now. Management moves so quickly. It's really just about dealing with people and knowing trends, the basics. You can get off YouTube. You can read my personal MBA by, who writes that?
Seth Godin, is that him?
Who, sorry?
Seth Godin, is that his right?
No, it's not Seth Godin. I should know. I've forgotten. I'd be able to tell you 12 months ago who wrote it. But look, if you want to do a management degree, then my personal MBA is probably honestly better in terms of the content that it gives you and what you need to learn and study. But what you can't get out of the personal MBA is lifelong friendships that serve you really well. And we talked about how it was false for me to come back to Hamilton and try and make some connections. Why was it so false for me? Because I've already got amazing connections in Hamilton from my time going to university here, from my growing up and going to school here, and that's the biggest thing that I've got out of university, honestly.
I mean, and we've spoken about, you and I personally, about university and the skills, and if you had to do it again, you've said to me you probably wouldn't go through that process. What would an internship with Thomas Nabbs look like?
Oh, gee, you could ask the interns that I've got about that. But so I try and talk to my interns and see what they want to get into. And I actually find a lot of people will say, yeah, I like the idea of that. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. I'd love people to touch on everything, even the things that they don't like. And I remember a bloke that you know well, David Morris. I think I tried to get David to read a couple of books. He was the very first intern, or he was the second intern who I took in actually. But I think I tried to get him to read books, and I quickly learned that any intern wasn't going to read a couple of books, even though I thought it would be beneficial to them. I would love it if interns were prepared to read books to help my development of them, so that we can talk about certain concepts. But Some people, I suppose, different from me, just want to get in and do a job and learn from doing a job. But it's very hard to teach them to do a job if they just want to do. I don't know, if you want to hit a tennis ball and you just want to grab a racket and go out and whack it, then that would be great. But imagine if you've never seen someone hit a tennis ball before. Would you hit it over your head, under your legs, or anything like that? But if I tell you first, and then you go and try it, and then we can go to a little bit more theory and talk about it a little bit more and what we could potentially do better and read as opposed to do, then that would be my ideal situation. And I also think that continual learning is the key to success, the absolute key to success. And the best way for me is to learn from books. And firstly, you need to know your learning style. You can consume that book in different ways. It can be audio, it can be visual. It might even be better to watch a movie or a vlog or something like that if you're more of a visual person and you don't take in reading very well. But for me, I've come to realize that I'm an audio listener. Absolutely. If you tell me something, I've got it, and I'm able to follow instructions quite well, but not so much the case of reading. So I spend hours listening to audiobooks, and that is the culmination of someone's life work. Why would you not want to take, and people don't put into books like some sort of stupid little tips that they think might be the case. They put their best stuff into the books. Now, yes, I don't know if I see the world differently, but surely if you could go up and ask someone their best lessons that they've ever learned, and it would take 3 or 4 hours for them to tell you that, you'd want to sit there and listen, wouldn't you? And so that makes you, I think it also, I don't know this scientifically, I haven't actually read or seen this, but it makes my brain think in a different way. And it gives me ideas, and my best ideas are thought of whilst listening to books, and I go and jot them down. And then you can adapt it to your environment, or adapt it to New Zealand's culture, or you can, it just opens your mind up and teaches you different lessons as well. So the ideal internship with Thomas Nabbs, if I had my way, would be a lot of doing, but also a lot of learning content-wise as well. But don't get me wrong, doing is absolutely critical. Absolutely critical. You can't just sit there and learn in theory, but theory is a part of it.
Awesome, mate. Couple more questions. What does sport mean to you, man?
Oh, what does sport mean to me? It's funny. Sport used to be the be all and end all to me. When I was a teenager, even in my early 20s, like I was lucky enough to win the Brewers Shield a couple of times with Fraser Tech. Shout out to you, Fraser Tech folk. The Hotafu boys are going to be spewing at me for saying that, rightfully so too. No, but that was like a part of my identity, winning those rugby games and winning those championships. And look, still is a massive, massive part of me, and I'm so proud to have been part of those championship winning teams. But I've come to, and during that same time, I used to get real cut up if the All Blacks would lose. I remember when the All Blacks lost the 2007 World Cup quarterfinal against France. I went out and I mowed the lawns all day, and I didn't speak to anyone, and I just mowed lawns, and I was so furious and I was frustrated, and like a big part of me was affected. And now, and because I was concentrated on the end goal, it was a goal. It was the destination that I wanted to be at. I wanted New Zealand to be world champions. I wanted Fraser Tech to be the champions. I wanted to be able to lift the Brewers Shield. But now it's more about the process to me. And it might be because I've got soft. It might be because, I don't know. But it's far more about the relationships and the journey rather than the destination. And enjoying that no matter what. So don't get me wrong, I absolutely want to win. I never ever go out to lose. But if I give it my best and I don't lose, I'm not cut up and devastated. I take perspective and take the positives out of things, and I also appreciate the journey more as I'm on that journey. Now, that journey isn't necessarily always just sport. It can be in business, a contract that I'm trying to win. I mightn't win it, but I can take the positives out of some cool interactions and some cool relationships that I've made. It might be you've just heard on this podcast that my relationship didn't work out. Now that was unfortunate, but gee, we had some great times and really appreciated it whilst I was in that relationship, and look back fondly on that relationship now still. And I don't get cut up over that stuff. I don't get cut up with failure because I use it as a perspective, or I use it as a learn, and I also appreciated the getting to that point. And so what does sport mean to me? Sport means a lot to me because it's an absolute metaphor for life, and sport has actually taught me what I've just explained to you. But I would used to say that sport defines me as a person. Now I'd say that sport has shaped me as a person, and I hope that makes sense. I don't know if it does.
That's awesome, mate, and I could definitely relate to you on that one, buddy. Especially when it comes to dealing with the failure of what you thought was your end goal, and looking back on it and going, "Hell, look where I am now to where I was before," and what I now know, what I've managed to achieve, whilst it wasn't the goal.
Yeah,
I've done some things that if you told me I was going to do beforehand, I might have looked at you funny. And
you'd be so much more, so. Just on that as well, you can choose how you react to every situation, right? And that's how you become happy. Like, some of the most happiest people are not the ones, are the ones with the very least. If you read The Happiness Advantage by Sean Achor, was it Archer? Sean Achor. Amazing book, and I'd recommend it to anyone. And he speaks of a guy who's standing in a bank in a big city, and the bank gets robbed, and the bank robber unleashes one shot, and it hits him right up in the top of the left bicep, right by his shoulder, and he had to go to hospital. He got the bullet whipped out, and he had every right, if he wanted, to sit there and think, man, this sucks. Out of all of the banks in the whole city, out of all the times that the bank could have been robbed, the one bank that I was in, the one time that I was there, got robbed. What were the chances of that? The world's really against me. Oh man, this sucks. And you know what? The bank robber let out one shot, and out of all the people in there, it just shot me. I didn't even do anything different. I had my hands up. I was getting down on the ground. The bank robber shot me. Oh, poor old me, I'm so unlucky. This sucks. The world's against me. Or he can sit there and take the perspective of, wow, that bullet just shot me in the top of my left bicep. That was 3 inches away from my heart. I'm so lucky to be alive. And when you take that perspective, when you look at the positives of everything, you get so much happier, and you're like, wow, I'm going to cherish this day like yesterday should have been my last, because man, someone was looking over me that day, as opposed to someone was looking down on me. Oh, that was the one place that I shouldn't be. And if you can always take the positives out of a situation, that is, yeah, I mean, that's the key to everything, I think.
Absolutely. Another great book along those lines is Useful Belief by Chris Howder. Goes from that same perspective, that is there any use in me being down and negative about it, or is it more useful for me to think about how lucky I am? And you're exactly right. Like, it could have been, 3 inches to the right, and it would have got me in the heart. And as you say about when it comes to relationships, you could think of that as a waste of time, or you could think of that's a beautiful moment in life, and things that I've learned and things that I now know, and it's is it of any use to you to be unhappy, or is there something that you can do? Because if you talk to any psychologists out there, they'll tell you you're the person that makes meaning of anything, and we're all just here as filters of what's going on around us, and we're the person that interprets, is this good or is this bad, and there's lots that can be said about language, even if we go back to weather. If it's raining, is it bad weather or is it just raining?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, mate.
So right.
Just one final question for you, Nabbs. How is sport going to continue to save our future in this country, and what can sporting organisations and schools do to ensure that carries on with the sort of tools and morals and skills that sport can teach people or shape people, as you said?
Interesting question. Let me think about that. Can you repeat it for me, please? Sorry, I just want to process it properly.
Yeah. How is sport going to continue to save our future?
Mm-hmm.
And what can the people who are involved in sport, so organisations and schools, do to ensure that we're catering for everybody, so that it can continue to be, so it can continue to shape young people like it has you and I?
Yeah, right. Okay. That's a good one. Right. So, well, firstly, I think that sport's got a part to play in changing the economy and those economic changes that I've already mentioned that the world needs to make, because there will be no real future if the economy, if people decide that the economy want to win that battle. So I think sports people have got to be being the role models that they are. Once we realise, or once the greater population come to realise the crisis that we're in the collision course that we're on, we've got a role to stand up there, and sport brings people together. So sports really got a huge role in delivering that message. And that let's get to get past the naysayer part of that. The pessimist part of that, and what I think you're really talking about here is the personal development and the sustained personal development that sport brings. And I mentioned before that I think sport's a large part of what makes up the fabric of New Zealand society. Now, I hope that that's going to continue for many years to come, but I think there's a couple of barriers that are in the road to that. I think we've really got to find the balance between professionalism and amateur. I think I've actually got a prediction that the All Blacks in New Zealand are not going to be the force that they have been for the last century, continued into the next century, and I think in about 15 years, excuse me, we're going to start seeing the demise of that. That is more or less due to professional rugby, and we are not seeing anymore the top players playing in club rugby, and therefore the prestige has been taken out of club rugby. And because the prestige has been taken out of club rugby, and the culture isn't there anymore. I also wrote a piece on my LinkedIn stating that the sports hubs or the sports clubs are no longer the community hub. I think there are ways that we can turn them back into the community hub. I think that sport brings people together and is the thriving metropolis, especially in a smaller community, but even in larger communities, they just look a little bit different. But there are ways to bring that back, in my eyes. But professionalism has got to play ball with that. I think amateur and professional can work side by side. Professionals just got to be a little less greedy. Professional have got to have the people playing the epitome of the sport and doing more for amateur as well. And also amateur have got to become a little bit more professional in some regards, to bring back the prestige into amateur sport. And if we can make that happen, and this isn't just talking rugby either, this is talking cricket, it's talking netball. Netball's a big one, and even rowing somewhat. Rowing, there's only a 20% carry on from people who row in school and then go on to row in club after that. If we can bridge that gap somewhat, and it may be with giving more increased prestige to New Zealand universities, that might be the answer, and more going down an American sport model where instead of our first 15s getting televised, let's televise our universities, and bring the prestige to the amateur level, and then have those amateur university players going on to then get the super contracts or to get into the NPC. And from that, I think sport's a wonderful thing. Sport will always teach you those lessons that it's taught me. It'll always give you that self-esteem boost, the feeling of being good at something. But we've got to harness how the sport works and keep sport enjoyable for people, and keep sport having its place in the community that it does. Because if we start ignoring the need for it to be enjoyable, i.e. going straight to professional, or not having all your mates do it, then we're a bit of a pickle there, and it's going to have more negative effects on society as it already has. I talked earlier about the increase in mental health issues and physical health issues, and if we don't maintain New Zealand sport, then I think we're in for not a future that isn't so bright as if we were to have sport.
Fantastic, mate. We'll wrap it up there. Thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure, and looking forward to what people think. Where can everybody find you, Thomas Nabbs, and the Water Boy? Where do we find you?
Oh, you can find me on Facebook. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find the Water Boy on Instagram. Or you can find me walking in and around the streets of Hamilton.
Nice, mate.
Right,
Thank you so much.
No worries. Thank you.
Cheers, brother.